A modern war, the first to be fought online. Kiev, which has driven away the latest horde, remains an unconquered target for the aggressor. There will be blackmail they will threaten. Everything else, except for nuclear weapons, was there for only that. But this blackmail is not new either. In principle, neither Ukraine nor the democratic world is responding to this anymore. The scapegoats will not be found among the elite. It's not Medvedev they're going to put in jail, or Shoigu. Yes, many Russians have their bags packed. The world, and its civilized and thinking part, is definitely tired, and has decided that it is tired from an aggressive, aging, declining empire. The continuation of active actions of our defenders to liberate the occupied territories is not passing. Ukraine is not waiting for the end of hostilities. It is doing everything possible and impossible to return our captured defenders, civilians who are illegally held by the racists home. Everyone has the right to be tired. And of course we all feel emotional. But compare this with those who are in captivity and those who are on the front line, in the trenches. They have the right to be tired, and everyone else should be more active in helping the front line.
We are all interested in the details of the counterattack. What is now happening to Crimea? How Ukraine has destroyed the myth about invulnerable Russian missiles? And, of course, forecasts for the coming months. We are going to find out about all these facts from the representative of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Andrii Yusov.
Слава Україні.
Героям слава.
In recent nights, the Russians activated their elite missiles, which have been a kind of trick up the Kremlin sleeve for a long time. However, due to our air defense, we are able to cope with them. Tell me, please, why Russia has activated this particular type of missile right now? And what does Putin hope for?
After the missile blitzkrieg failed in winter and early spring, when they tried to destroy the Ukraine's energy infrastructure, plunge the country into a blackout, and spread panic. None of this has worked. In fact, like invading Kiev within 3 days, the tactics of missile strikes have changed. On the one hand, it is mostly aimed at complicating or disrupting the plans of the Ukrainian security and defense forces to further liberate the occupied territories. On the other hand, of course, the goals for propaganda should still be sacred and ideological. And Kiev, which is resisting, Kiev, which suppressed the new horde, remains an unconquered target for the aggressor. So, the danger still remains. But after our partners have delivered additional means of air defense, and our air force has learned how to operate them, the enemy is testing its first-of-a-kind weapons and would like to show that it can do something to the Ukrainian army and Western weapons. But it fails. There were successive shellings, but, in fact, all missiles were shot. And our soldiers, air forces, air defense equipment show the best results. In fact, the only thing which the aggressor can show is some rumors that certain types of Western weapons are damaged. And we should understand that, of course, there are attempts, mass attempts which are unprecedented. So many caliber and Kinjal missiles at once, but these are mostly performances. They will not be able to repeat similar performances often and with such intensity.
When Russian Kinjal missiles were shot, 3 scientists of Novosibirsk Institute of Applied Mathematics, who had devised these missiles, were arrested. The Kremlin does not give any comments. So, in your opinion, why did Russia take this path? And why were the scientists accused of treason?
It's not just treason. What is meant here is transfer of information to another country, with which Putin seems to have very friendly relations. That's what they declare. It is not Ukraine or the United States. Cases were launched even earlier. Well, everything is logical. If propaganda and part of society wants to live back in the days of Stalin, it is not surprising. To live back in the days of Stalin means, among other things, political reprisal, as well as annihilation of technical intellectuals. And, of course, mass accusation of treason. A light option is foreign agents. The direct option is treason. Russian security forces still like accusing people of various sexual offenses, abuse and pedophilia. This time the scientists were lucky. We don't have any sympathy for them. These are the people who help to improve the weapons, which are aimed at killing civilians and our defenders. But, nevertheless, they are now victims of the regime. There will be questions, including corruption, high-level corruption. What were these hundreds of millions and billions of dollars spent for? Dollars intended for improvement and reforms of the Russians' horde to make it an army. But as a result, even first-of-a-kind weapons in the form of Kinjal missiles turn out to be a PR product. Of course, it is a dangerous missile, and it's hard to shoot it. And this is a serious work, and a challenge for the air forces and air defense equipment. But this is not the thing which the Patriot system is not able to cope with, as well as our specialists who operate the air defense systems. And this is not the hypersonic first-of-a-kind weapons which were announced. They will definitely not be looking for scapegoats among the political elite. Medvedev or Shoigu is not to be arrested. Well, it's easier to find someone else. Professors are a great option, especially since their colleagues will seek pardon from the Tsar. As they once asked in the days of Stalin, they are definitely not capable of any civil act or any civil protest at this stage, at least a large-scale one, and the Russian security forces are counting on this.
We observe how Russia has intensified shelling of Odesa. Wikipedia, by the way, reads that you come from Odesa.
It is true.
Tell me, what sacred sense does this city have for the Russian Federation?
Yes, I come from Odesa, like the previous 3 generations of my ancestors. The city is very sacred for them. And in particular, after the well-known events of May 2, when there were attempts to plunge Odesa into the darkness of the Russian world, Odesa did not give up. Odesa rejected Russians' propaganda. Odesa has become a reliable rear area and part of a large pro-Ukrainian front for the defense forces. Many citizens of Odesa are now defending our country along the entire front line. And Russian propaganda, part of the Putin's propaganda, has been explaining to itself for many years that Odesa is a Russian city. It turns out that it is not. Odesa is a beautiful and picturesque Ukrainian city. Of course, Ukrainians live there, perhaps different in terms of their national and cultural origins, but they are conscious Ukrainians who want to live in an independent European Ukraine and certainly not in Russia. And of course, the Kremlin is trying to take revenge and will take revenge. But in addition to propaganda tasks, there are also purely organizational and logistical ones. The enemy is trying to sound out the supply routes, logistics centers, chains of communication supporting our security and defense forces, realizing that active actions of our defenders to liberate Ukrainian territories is inevitable.
And do you admit that against the backdrop of defeats with their missiles, the Kremlin can resort to heavier weapons? For example, nuclear weapons or perhaps some other types of missiles.
Actually, they used everything except for nuclear weapons. Therefore, only this remains. But this kind of blackmail is not new either. In principle, neither Ukraine nor other countries of the world pay any attention to this. In particular, these are the things which will no longer be tolerated, including those countries which have not yet broken off relations with this crazy dictatorial regime and collective Putin. Therefore, there will be blackmail, and they will utter threats. And a person under the influence of some substances, Dmitry Medvedev, can post many disgusting and outrageous things against Ukraine, Poland, Britain, and the United States. But, as before, with a high degree of probability, nothing will be behind this.
I cannot but raise an issue which is now being discussed in the media. This is a post by the journalist Butusov, in which he assessed the Principal Directorate of Intelligence during intense hostilities. It would be better if the head of the Directorate devoted all his time to high-quality operational planning and tried to listen to his subordinates, but not another film crew. The author of the post seems to accuse Kyrylo Budanov of giving too many interviews. And Russian propagandists have already taken up this idea. What can this show? Does this prove that there is freedom of speech in Ukraine?
Actually, it is difficult to discuss such things without some irony. Indeed, Ukraine is a very democratic state, which is currently waging a difficult war, a war for survival. And it is very strange when at the same time the Ukrainian special services, including their heads, are cruelly criticized and discredited by the Russians' propaganda. The purpose is clear. They are outspoken enemies, and we wage war on them. At the same time, such services are criticized by bloggers in Ukraine. This is strange at least. And they additionally create content, which is then taken up by the Russians' propaganda. I don't think it's worth making comments anymore. This is an issue from the category, for what and to whom it is beneficial. And as for means and public communication, the modern war is actually the first war, which, firstly, is so large-scale since the World War II in Europe, and secondly, the first war which actually takes place online. It means that a great part of the information campaign, of assessments, and of reliable information in this war is against Ukraine. Even before the full-scale invasion, the hybrid war required enormous resources from Russia. They allocated funds for psychological warfare efforts, agents of influence, political scientists, bloggers, and for networks which were supposed to work, both in Ukraine and around the world, to ensure promoting the Russian propaganda. And the story of military mosquitoes looks funny now. However, if we count all those hundreds of millions and billions of dollars wasted for this propaganda network, it doesn't look so funny anymore. Therefore, in the modern world, strategic communication means are necessary, including the special services. Ukraine is no exception. Our Western partners both in Europe and overseas frequently use modern communication tools and, let's say, spend much more funds for a long time, absolutely officially, in particular, for promotion in the same social media. But in addition to the information component, as the Ukrainian society is under unprecedented pressure by the Russian propaganda, manipulations, and distortions, it is necessary to inform the society. And the military and political leaders of the state do this. I think that they do it effectively and efficiently. And as for many other things, if we speak about the essence, content, surnames, and certain actions, we will be able to discuss in details and pointedly after the victory.
I would like to discuss the situation at the front with you. How often does the enemy change its tactics in the Eastern Front? And given that Russia has some stockpile of ammunition, can we believe Prigozhin's claims of ammunition hunger?
The conflict between Prigozhin, Shoigu, and Gerasimov is real. It really takes place. And in fact, it also happens online, and we are witnessing it. Therefore, when we are talking about the artificial limitation of the resources of certain units, and now we are talking about Prigozhin's PMK, Wagner Group, this is an absolutely correct question. We can say that there are such facts, and we can discuss the issue of scale and frequency separately. But the fact that in general and in the Bakhmut front in particular, the enemy concentrated the lion's share of efforts in order to get at least some results, is true. It is also true that their losses in troops and military equipment are not justified either by the goals or by the results obtained. These losses are largely due to the fighters of the Wagner PMC, who are actively involved in assault operations. This is also true. Therefore, the price of this, which is paid by the Russian army, as well as the entire Russian society, is high. Someday, they will probably ask, for what? What is the result? The Ukrainian Donbas was supposed to be occupied by the Russians by March 30. At least the so-called Putin and Gerasimov set such a goal. And now it is already May. By May 9, well, it will soon be the end of May. Nevertheless, the defense of Bakhmut continues. Of course, it continues at a great cost for Ukraine, and these are the heroic efforts of our defenders. Measures to liberate the occupied territories in the same direction are also taken. As for the practical purpose of the invaders' actions, as well as all their absurd and completely idiotic, the so-called special military operation, there is no need to speak about the practical purpose. Recently, the number of killed Russians has exceeded 200,000. And for sure, every ordinary citizen of the country, which is still called the Russian Federation, can be asked, for what? Have any of the residents of Moscovia ever been to Bakhmut? Has anyone even seen this town? Or Berdyansk? Or Kherson? No, these people have never been there. And in fact, every family in Russia has been affected by the war in a sense in the form of losses. It is a husband, a brother, a son, and, maybe, a nephew or a cousin. But this is already an issue of facing ordinary Russians with a reality which does not correspond to the picture on TV. And sooner or later, this problem will cause a split among the propagandists as well. After all, we see their program failure from time to time. Like after Simonian's speech, that the red lines turn out to be not red at all. I think it's wonderful.
Before the full-scale invasion, there was a myth in the world that Russia was a powerful state which seemed to rank second among the armies of the world. But our armed forces have shown that this is not true. And of course, this happened due to Ukrainian intelligence services. I have a question for you. Has the world changed its view of the Ukrainian intelligence?
It is not as if it had changed. Probably, it has taken shape and continues developing. Before the full-scale invasion, there was little information on the Ukrainian special services in the world. And if there was some, it was mostly in terms of various negative phenomena, scandals, including scandals with suppression, for example, of the opposition and civil society. After the annexation of Crimea, and after Putin started the war in Donbas, Ukrainian special services are spoken about in terms of countering the aggressor, liberating territories, fighting against occupiers, betrayers and collaborators. And, of course, it also refers to the Principal Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense. And in view of the public materials, which we now see in the world media, in view of their interest in the Ukrainian special services, in the PDI and their leaders, this image is taking shape for the benefit of Ukraine. Given the fact that Ukraine is waging war, the largest one since World War II in Europe, there are certainly few people in the world who have such experience of countering modern challenges as the Ukrainian special services, the intelligence community, and the PDI of the Ministry of Defense have. Of course, this is the subject of constant interaction with partners, exchange of information, and study of Ukrainian experience. Both agent work and special operations, including military ones, Zmyny Island, liberation of Kharkiv region, defense of Kiev region, helicopter evacuation and Azovstal metallurgical plant in Mariupol, and many other successful operations. For example, evacuation of Ukrainians, and not only Ukrainians, from Afghanistan, and recently from Sudan. And many operations which we cannot unveil yet. But we will definitely talk about them after the victory.
The Coordination Staff for Treatment of War Prisoners is performing an unprecedented work. It seems to me that every Ukrainian watches every prisoner exchange as we return our people. Of course, I do not ask about the details, but still we are waiting for news about the exchange of all war prisoners. Tell me, please, is there any news in this sphere?
We are working on it. And the main thing in the work of the coordination staff is to discuss not only the process, but the result. And we see the results. And the results are unprecedented. Even the international humanitarian law and the Geneva Conventions provide for returning war prisoners after the end of hostilities. Ukraine is not waiting for the end of hostilities and is doing everything possible to return our defenders, civilians, who are illegally held by Russians, home. Now more than 2,300 of our defenders have been returned from captivity. This work continues, including serious work in exchanging all war prisoners. We are not going to unveil the details, but it is an absolutely realistic project.
Every exchange is important. Also, every exchange supposes certain feelings and emotions. Can you tell, or do you have a story, which impressed you most in terms of return of war prisoners?
It is difficult to single out stories, because each story is unique in its own way. Each story is a story of heroism and, at the same time, pain of relatives. And we often have to communicate with the relatives of our defenders being in captivity, with mothers, wives and sisters. These are near-saint people, to whom we should thank infinitely for their understanding and patience. And, of course, it is a great happiness when, as a result of the great teamwork of the coordination staff, it is possible to return our defenders home. And immediately we start another work. After each exchange, we understand well that there are several dozen families who receive good news and there are thousands of families waiting for good news. It means that they should wait. And emotionally, of course, every exchange is a wave of emotions. When a soldier leaves the bus, he kisses the ground. This is not an image. It is true. And when they cry, laugh or hug each other and their relatives, we experience strong emotions.
Recently, I have come across a video on the internet in which a representative of Russia came to exchange prisoners of war. The video shows that the occupiers refused from returning to Russia, saying that they did not want to return to the war again and to their home. Tell me, please, have you ever had such situations and has the Russians' rhetoric changed?
Rhetoric has changed in some terms. If at the beginning of a full-scale invasion, there were a lot of stories that we are on training here, we don't know at all, we are here by chance, and I'm here as a tourist, and out of the swim of things. After about half a year, it was difficult to continue telling these stories. They looked very absurd. It's mostly a poor show now. Especially when they talk about contractors, they are at war to earn money and came here to kill women and children in order to earn money. Mostly, this is the key motivation. There was an opinion poll among the Russians' prisoners of war. A key motivation is economic stability. That is, it is not propaganda, it is not a Russian world, but it is actually money. There are extremely few ideological elements. Those partially mobilized say that they didn't want to, it wasn't their decision, they were sent, etc. In general, there are many videos and comments where you can hear this nonsense. In general, one should understand that these are criminals. And if there were no need to exchange them for our prisoners, obviously, their stay in Ukraine would be longer. There are also very few sentimental stories to tell. Those people, who have dignity and conscience, find a way out. Either not to join the occupying army, or while in the army, to turn to the coordination staff for the alien project, leave an application and surrender, in order not to become murderers and war criminals. All other fairy tales are also an interesting genre. but it is already on another shelf and in another store.
What will happen to Russia if Putin dies? Imagine if Putin dies today, who can be his successor in office? And will this become a new challenge for Ukraine?
There are many scenarios, and it is necessary to work all of them out and analyze. We can't consider only one scenario. If Putin dies, or he is known to have died, for example, recently, why do we think that Putin's office will remain? Even in the history of Moscovia there were different periods, the rule of 7 boyars and 7 oligarchs and many other examples. The structure, which was built in the last decades with public information on the negative public life of this dictator, will collapse, and some new structure will be built. Obviously, in new realities, political, geopolitical, perhaps, and most likely, geographical. In other words, there will be some other office, not Putin's one, and it makes no sense to discuss specific names now. Unless we want one of them to be killed or otherwise eliminated in this dog-eat-dog place sooner rather than later.
And I have a question about military groups. That is, I understand that the situation can lead to, as you have said, a dog-eat-dog place. And then, won't we have to fight not against one fanatic, but against dozens of such groups?
Dozens of groups. If events develop according to this scenario, will most likely be busy with their own problems, and how to divide the areas of responsibility, lucrative areas, and spheres of influence in the new reality. I think they will have other things to worry about.
Let's talk about Crimea. On the morning of May 18, there was an explosion on the railway in Simferopol district of Crimea, which resulted in the suspended train traffic. The Russians claim that this is sabotage. This is not the only case. What can we expect in this direction in the future?
While Crimea and other Ukrainian territories are occupied, the occupying power bears full responsibility for everything happening there. Obviously, lately it cannot ensure either the proper operation of the infrastructure, including transport, or safety of citizens, even compliance with fire safety rules. The Ukrainian authorities must return there to restore order, peace, comfort and regular operation of railway transport, including in the Ukrainian Crimea. Until then, everything which contributes to the occupation forces, to transportation of weapons and personnel for attacks on peaceful Ukrainian cities and civilians, will, of course, run off the rails from time to time, with various incidents occurring. This is an absolutely logical and natural development of events.
The occupation authorities in the Crimea officially recognized canceling the holiday season. In addition, the head of the Russian Ministry of Transport has recently stated that they are strengthening control over the Kerch Strait. It means that the invaders began strengthening control over passenger transport and not only transport. Where can the occupiers escape during a counterattack?
I think that we will not prompt them. They themselves should show ingenuity. In general, if we leave aside the bridge, which may be under repair at the time, there are other means, ferry crossings, some other things, etc. Some of the occupiers, especially if we speak about the occupation administration, have already taken care in advance and taken their families from the Ukrainian peninsula. Some of them are trying to implement and do it online right now. Yes, many people have their suitcases packed. In general, as far as possible, the wisest among them should leave Crimea now. This is the safest option for them.
In the first months of the full-scale invasion, there were a lot of talks about the war abroad, with a focus on the situation in Ukraine. Now there are fewer and fewer mentions of Ukraine, I mean abroad. Instead, the narrative that the world is tired of the war in Ukraine is spreading. How dangerous can it be for us?
The fact that the world is getting tired is one of the narratives of the Russians' propaganda. And in general, since 2014, it has actually been promoted. Since 2014, the world has been getting tired, but it strengthened the sanction policy. It was getting tired but started giving stingers and javelins. It is very tired now, and we have Abrams and Leopards, as well as Patriot systems. And tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have been trained abroad. As we can see, more and more people are getting tired. And the mere opposite is that the world, its civilized and thinking part, is definitely tired. It has made a decision for itself that it is tired of the aggressive, aging, declining empire and Putin's Russians regime. They are definitely tired of them. And the world today is looking for a solution, how to arrange a new world without the entity, which constantly attacks someone, takes repressive actions against its own citizens, and violates the rules of international security. The world is definitely tired of Moscovia, of the so-called Russian Federation. And one can say in a good sense that the world is just getting to know Ukraine. And through the means of the European Union, through cultural diplomacy, of course, through humanitarian aid to our refugees, and through military cooperation, Ukraine is returning to the free world, returning to Europe. The civilized world is likely to say goodbye to Russia.
Let's be honest, we also have people, not many of them, who say that they are tired of war. They are not tired of providing assistance, but tired of the war. What would you say to such people?
Call a friend being at the front, or call someone who is now on the front line. I think that, in fact, every family has such relatives, acquaintances, or friends. To ask someone in Bakhmut or Avdiivka, "How are you, friend? Aren't you tired?" I think that one call a month for therapeutic purposes will be enough for such fatigue. Especially if people are in Kiev, despite the regular explosions here, in Lviv, or, for example, in Warsaw or Lisbon. Everyone has the right to be tired. And of course, we all worry. It is impossible to compare our feelings to those of someone who is in captivity, in a trench on the front lines and under shelling. They can't be compared to the feelings of a mother, waiting for her son's return from captivity, or of a wife whose husband doesn't answer the phone for several days because of battles, etc. I think they have the right to be tired. And everyone else should provide more aid to the front.
After our victory, Russia will remain in any case. I don't understand in what format, but it will remain.
Yes, it will.
What should we do after our victory, primarily domestically and in our foreign policy, in order all these things not to happen again?
Firstly, let's not to consider the so-called Russia as constant and something eternal. There is nothing eternal. And of course, in different times the so-called Russian Federation had different shapes, borders, names and state structure. There was the Soviet Union, the Empire, and the Principality of Moscow. Before that, there were swamps, with frogs croaking. Everything changes. Everything is dynamic. And what today is called the Russian Federation, tomorrow may be called differently and have different borders, including geographical ones. After all, if we talk about the right of nations to self-determination, today the largest number of occupied territories and peoples are located on the territory of the so-called Russian Federation. These nations, quite possibly, have every reason to wake up and intensify the struggle for their own rights, which, I think, will happen. And what should we do? Much has been said on this topic, and it is difficult to add something. On the one hand, to be strong and understand that this enemy is ancient. It has been for centuries and will remain for centuries. It means that people speaking about resumption of dialogue, ceasefire, irrelevance of the army, etc., will be enemies with their proposals in this context. Yes, we should be ready now. And the Ukrainian army must be strong and powerful. Defense forces must be strong and powerful at all times. On the other hand, we should be an integral part of the security and political structure of the civilized world, the European Union, and the Euro-Atlantic integration. After all these things are written in the Ukrainian constitution. I'm sure that it will happen.
Thank you, Andrii, for your time. Today, in the studio of online.ua, a representative of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Andrii Yusov. Subscribe to our channel and click on the bell not to miss new episodes and broadcasts on online.ua.